Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to ancient Greece. Not the one from marble postcards or epic movies, but the softer, quieter Greece of ordinary days. You find yourself waking in a courtyard where the air smells faintly of olive oil and sea salt. The cicadas are already rehearsing their endless song, and the light is so sharp it feels like it could slice through a shadow. You blink, stretch, and realize you have no idea what time it is, which, in this world, is both normal and slightly terrifying, because, funny enough, the Greeks didn't actually have time the way you do. You probably won't survive this schedule. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is right now, wherever you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes again. The marble is cool beneath your bare feet. Somewhere, a rooster complains about dawn. You follow the soft splash of water toward the courtyard center, where a man in a linen tunic is crouched beside what looks like a large bronze plate balanced on a stand. His hands move with quiet confidence. "You see," he murmurs, tracing a thin rod's shadow, "the gods always tell us when we are. This is your first Greek sundial. The rod, called a gnomon, casts a sharp line across a series of carved grooves. The shadow's tip creeps almost imperceptibly, sliding toward a new mark. To your 21st century mind, it feels almost absurdly slow, like watching paint dry, except this drying paint is the heartbeat of the city. In Athens or Corinth, these little devices could be found in courtyards, temples, even public squares. They weren't private clocks exactly, they were shared agreements, communal understandings of when it was too early to bother your neighbor or time to start boiling lentils. You crouch beside the man, watching the shadow lengthen. "How do you know when to eat lunch?" you ask. He shrugs, smiles. "When the shadow falls just there." He points to a faint scratch on the plate. Nothing precise, but everyone in town knows what it means. A collective shrug toward the sky. Sundials were introduced to Greece around the 6th century BCE, adapted from Egyptian models that tracked the sun's movement using obelisks. The Greeks, with their love of geometry, refined the concept, cutting hemispherical bowls into stone, setting up slanted rods to match their latitude, even engraving lines for seasonal changes. You can imagine one philosopher looking at a shadow and saying, "There's math in that," and there was. The sun becomes your teacher here. The courtyard man, let's call him Lysandros, explains how the length of the day itself changes. In summer, the daylight hours stretch long. In winter, they shrink. So Greek hours weren't equal like yours are. When the sun rose, you counted 12 divisions until it set, no matter the season, which meant a summer hour could last 75 modern minutes, while a winter one might limp along at 45. In other words, a Greek lunch hour was a flexible creature. You can imagine scheduling a meeting with, "I'll see you 5 shadows from now." As you stroll toward the city, the sunlight glances off whitewashed walls and terracotta roofs. At a crossroads, you notice another sundial, taller and more elaborate. It's part of a public fountain where water murmurs softly. People glance at it as they pass. Farmers carrying baskets, a woman leading a child, a slave balancing amphorae. No one seems obsessed with time, yet everyone moves in subtle coordination with it. The sundial is not a tyrant here. It's a companion, patient and benevolent. You pause to rest on a low stone wall, watching as the day blooms brighter. There's a strange serenity in realizing that without digital numbers to glance at, you start measuring moments by temperature, sound, and shadow length. You know it's mid-morning because the shadows have softened and the smell of baking bread wafts from nearby ovens. You feel time in your skin, not your screen. Then you notice something curious. The sundial's shadow isn't quite where it should be. Lysandros, passing by again, laughs softly. "Clouds," he says, nodding toward a thin veil creeping across the sun. "Zeus hides his face, and we lose the hour." You glance upward, amused and a little awed. A calendar that depends entirely on the sky. How fragile, how human. Here's your quirky tidbit: owned portable sundials, small enough to carry on journeys. One was found shaped like a miniature folding bowl, complete with inscriptions for different cities, because the latitude changed the shadow's behavior. Imagine pulling that out of your toga pocket to check the time. An ancient smartphone that only works outdoors on sunny days in a specific city. Lysandros, ever patient, adjusts the gnomon slightly. Historians still argue, he says with a knowing smile, whether these sundials were meant to measure civic time or personal reflection. And indeed, scholars still debate that. Were these devices tools for coordinating society or meditative reminders of cosmic order? Maybe both. In Greece, even the simplest object came wrapped in philosophy. By noon, the real noon, when the sun stands highest, everything slows. The marketplace hums softly in the distance. You can almost feel the air grow heavy with olive-scented heat. The sundial's shadow lies short and dark beneath the rod, the hour when gods rest and mortals do too. You drift toward a nearby temple, half for shade, half for curiosity. The marble steps shimmer. On the wall outside, a sculptor has etched a crude semicircle marked with faint divisions. It's another sundial, but this one faces east. You learn that priests use different orientations to catch the rising or setting sun, each tied to ritual hours. Somewhere within the cool interior, chants echo faintly, time told not by numbers, but by rhythm and repetition. You notice how much the sun rules everything here. Work begins when it rises, ends when it falls. Time isn't something you fight or manipulate, it's something you follow. People don't rush to beat deadlines, they flow like the daylight, adjusting with patience. If it rains, appointments vanish. If it's hot, naps appear. It's a strangely forgiving system, though your modern brain itches for a calendar notification. As the afternoon fades, the shadows stretch long again, lazily crossing the marble courtyard. You sit where you began, beside Lysandros. He's sipping watered wine, the Greek version of iced tea. He points toward the shadow, now stretching past the final groove on his plate. "There," he says softly, "time to stop." You realize there's no bell, no beep, no urgent reminder, just the shadow fading into twilight. The last light gilds the rooftops like honey, then slips away entirely. You can hear distant laughter, the crackle of torches being lit, a few goats complaining about bedtime. Lysandros pours you a little wine. "You see," he says, "the sun measures our days, but not our lives. The gods do that." You nod, though you're not entirely sure whether he means it literally or just as a gentle joke. Probably both. The Greeks liked to blur the line between philosophy and casual conversation. As darkness thickens, you notice how the absence of the sun doesn't mean an absence of time. The stars begin to bloom overhead, the moon lifting like a silver coin. Somewhere, a temple guard lights a water clock, your first glimpse of night's own timekeeper. But that's for later. For now, you listen to the whispering night and think about how this people, so ancient and yet so familiar, lived by shadows, tiny movements that guided everything from lunch breaks to legal speeches. You lean back against the stone, the night air cool on your skin. In a world without ticking seconds, you realize that time isn't something to chase. It's something to notice. A shifting line of light, a bird's cry, a flicker of shadow. The kind of time you could fall asleep to. You wake again to the muted glow of morning, still in that same courtyard, though the light has changed. It's thinner now, stretching sideways across the flagstones, and you realize with quiet amusement that you have no idea what hour this might be. The Greeks, you're starting to understand, didn't really need to know either. A servant walks by carrying a tray of figs, barley bread, and goat cheese, humming softly. No one rushes. The rhythm of the house feels fluid, unhurried, like everyone is tuned to the same invisible instrument. You remember the sundial from yesterday, its shadows slowly crossing those faint lines, but Lysandros isn't there this morning. Instead, a temple attendant in a simple white robe waves you over, motioning toward a different sort of marker, a stone column etched with curving lines but no numbers. "This," she says, her voice low and calm, "is how we count hours, though perhaps not as you mean it." You step closer. The column looks like the ghost of a clock, structured but somehow uncertain. She traces one of the lines with her fingertip. "The day has 12 parts," she explains, "but they are not equal. In summer, the day is longer, so the hours are longer too. In winter, the day is short, and so are the hours. We follow Helios, not the other way around." And just like that, your sense of time, already wobbly, completely unravels. Because in ancient Greece, hours weren't fixed lengths like they are for you. The Greeks divided daylight into 12 segments, no matter the season, meaning that as the sun's path changed, so did the length of each hour. The same went for night, 12 divisions between sunset and sunrise, even though winter nights could last twice as long as summer ones. So when someone in Athens said, "Meet me at the 3rd hour," it was only meaningful if you knew what month it was and how long the daylight happened to last. The temple attendant leads you to a shady corner where a clay pot of water cools. "The day," she says, "begins when the light is born from darkness. The first hour belongs to new things. The first fires lit, the first bread baked." She dips her fingers in the water, letting it drip. "By the 3rd hour, the market wakes. By the 6th, the sun is a tyrant." She smiles. "By the 12th, we rest and thank the gods." You realize this whole rhythm, this living calendar, is tied not to measurement, but to experience. The Greeks didn't think of time as something you controlled. It was something that happened to you, like wind or rain. You didn't tell time, you felt it. You follow her through the narrow temple corridor, where the air smells faintly of smoke and beeswax. In the center, a small altar glows with oil lamps. One flickers uncertainly, and she adjusts the wick with practiced grace. "These flames," she murmurs, "must burn for a set number of hours each night." You raise an eyebrow. "How do you count them?" She gestures to a thin beam of sunlight that sneaks through a slit in the roof, illuminating a spot on the floor. "When the light first touches this stone," she says, "we begin. When it disappears, the lamps must be replaced. That is the temple's day." You can't help but smile. The concept feels so strangely poetic, like running a business by sunrise and shadow instead of a punch clock. You imagine a modern office where people leave when the light touches the coffee machine. The world might actually be calmer for it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The word hora, from which we get hour, comes from Greek, meaning not a strict unit of time, but a season or proper moment. A hora was when something should happen, when crops were ripe, when a feast was due, when the tide of the day carried you toward action. The Greeks didn't think in ticks and talks, they thought in right moments. You step outside again into the marketplace, or agora. The hum of voices rises around you, vendors shouting about olives and sandals, philosophers debating in circles, a harpist strumming something lazy and sweet. But no one is checking a watch. The only clock is the light. You notice how the sun leans slightly west now, gilding the tops of statues. A merchant rolls up his shade and laughs. Second half of the day already. He's joking, but also serious. His timekeeping is entirely visual. You stroll through the crowd, noticing how everyone seems to share an intuitive understanding of what time it feels like. The fishmonger packs up when the sun starts fading, not because the hour strikes 5, but because shadows grow long enough to touch the stalls. The blacksmith knows it's nearly the 6th hour when the heat inside his forge rivals the one outside. The Greeks lived by the sun's personality, not by its position. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some city-states experimented with other ways to mark time. On certain islands, people used hour stones, small rocks arranged in circles, each representing a division of the day. As the shadow of a pole moved, it pointed toward a different stone. Children sometimes played with miniature versions, setting up their own little schedules for games and chores. Imagine a sandbox calendar powered by sunlight and curiosity. You pause near a colonnade where two philosophers are arguing gently. One, a bearded man in a gray cloak, gestures at the sky. Time, he insists, is motion. Without motion, there is no before or after. His friend shakes his head. No, time is the measure of motion. It exists even when nothing moves. You smile faintly. The argument sounds familiar, eternal. The first man is echoing Aristotle. The second, perhaps, anticipating a physicist 2,000 years too early. The temple attendant reappears beside you, as though she's been eavesdropping. Historians still argue, she says lightly, whether the Greeks even believed in linear time. You blink. What do you mean? She gestures toward the marketplace, now glowing gold in the afternoon sun. They saw life as cycles, days, seasons, generations. Time didn't march forward, it spun, like the turning of a wheel or the orbit of the stars. The future wasn't a destination, just another return. The thought lingers with you as you walk. Maybe that's why everything feels so unhurried here, why no one seems anxious about what's next. When time is circular, there's no real end, only repetition. The olives will ripen again, the festivals will return. Even mistakes might find their way back, softened by memory. You find yourself wandering toward the edge of the city, where the road slopes gently toward the sea. A few farmers pass you with baskets of grain, their faces browned by sun. One glances at the sky and mutters, "Ninth hour already," though you can't tell what gives it away. Perhaps the angle of the light, the smell of salt, or simply the instinct of someone who's lived his whole life outdoors. When you reach the shore, the waves glitter like broken glass. The air hums softly, the kind of sound that makes your shoulders drop without realizing. Somewhere inland, you hear the faint clang of a temple bell, not a precise time signal, just a cue for evening prayers. You sit on a rock and think about how much quieter life must have been without minutes or seconds slicing everything apart. You didn't waste time here, you simply lived inside it, like a current. You couldn't be late, not really, because time was flexible, kind. As the sky deepens, the first stars begin to blink awake. The Greeks knew them well: Orion, Pleiades, Arcturus, each not just a constellation, but a clock hand of sorts. Farmers watched the rising of Sirius to mark harvests. Sailors timed voyages by the setting of Lyra. Even the stars kept time, but only in relation to human needs. "We are not masters of time," she says. "We are its guests." You glance up, feeling the slow spin of the heavens. Somewhere, you can almost hear the faint tick of centuries blending together, patient and unhurried. And for a moment, it feels right that you don't know the hour. You're inside it now, folded into a world where shadows and seasons breathe together, and time, instead of being measured, simply exists. The next morning arrives not with an alarm or a clock chime, but with the gentle plop of water hitting water. You follow the sound through a narrow corridor lined with stone jars and clay basins, the air cool and heavy with dampness. Down a few steps, the faint drip echoes like a heartbeat. You're standing in front of something that looks almost too simple to be revolutionary: a clay vessel with a tiny hole in its base perched above another bowl. A young man in a tunic, narrow-shouldered, hair tied with a bit of string, greets you. "You've come to see time," he says, smiling, "the kind that flows." You found the clepsydra, or water clock. The Greeks used it long before the gears and pendulums of later centuries, long before sand would trickle through glass. Here, time doesn't tick, it drips. He kneels, pours fresh water from an amphora into the top bowl, and the slow rhythm begins again. Plink, plink, plink. This, he explains, is how we measure fairness. You tilt your head. Fairness? He nods toward a doorway where muffled voices echo, men arguing, the occasional bark of laughter. It's a courtroom, small and stuffy. Inside, a row of citizens sits listening while a speaker at the center gestures dramatically. The young man whispers, "Each speaker is given one clepsydra of time. When the water runs out, so does his argument." It's oddly poetic. Justice here is not a gavel or a stopwatch. It's the steady draining of a jar. You step inside the courtroom. The crowd is restless, fans flicking in the warm air. A magistrate signals, and the assistant brings the water clock forward. The dripping grows louder in the hush. The speaker, a wiry farmer defending his land, launches into his case, his words flowing to the same rhythm as the drops. You realize the entire speech is tethered to that sound. He glances at the vessel occasionally, his voice speeding up as the water level lowers. This isn't metaphor, it's literal time running out. Mainstream historical fact: Greek courts in classical Athens used water clocks extensively. The clepsydra, meaning water thief, controlled how long citizens could speak. The devices varied in size, small ones for quick cases, large ones for complex trials. And there was even a protocol. When evidence was read aloud, the flow was stopped. Time paused for fairness. You watch as the last of the water vanishes with a soft gulp. The room exhales. The judge raises a hand. Time's up. No exceptions. You can't help but think how mercilessly democratic that is. No matter how rich or eloquent you are, water flows the same for everyone. As the crowd disperses, the young attendant lifts the empty vessel. "It's strange," he says quietly, "that justice should depend on how steady one's hand pours." He chuckles. Historians still argue whether these clocks measured time or simply ritual. He wipes the rim with his sleeve, thoughtful. Perhaps both. Perhaps fairness itself must be seen to flow. You step outside into the courtyard. The air feels lighter, almost musical with birdsong. You can still hear phantom droplets in your ears, like a lingering echo of justice. Around the corner, a craftsman hunches over a half-finished clepsydra, carving lines along its rim. "Graduations," he explains without looking up. "Each line marks a different hour, for astronomers, or priests, or philosophers who forget when dinner is." He grins. His hands are stained with clay. But the hardest part is the hole. Too wide and time rushes away. Too narrow and it never moves. He dips his finger in water to test it, the way you might test the battery of a watch. It must flow steady, like breath. You run a finger along the grooves. The markings are precise, mathematical. You learn that Greek inventors, especially those in Alexandria later on, experimented endlessly with these devices. They built float valves, siphons, even tiny automata, little figures that pointed at marks as the water fell. Some clepsydrae used inflow rather than outflow, where rising water lifted a pointer on a scale. Imagine that, a primitive analog clock whispering its way through hours no one quite agreed upon. You take a sip of water from the craftsman's jug. It tastes faintly of minerals, cold and grounding. Around you, the workshop hums. The smell of clay and fire lingers in the air, the rhythmic sound of tools against pottery blending with the soft burble of a fountain nearby. You realize that this sound, water dripping, trickling, filling, is the soundtrack of Greek time. You wander through Athens, now noticing how water governs everything. Fountains mark public spaces, baths open and close with the sun. Even philosophers pace near springs, timing lectures by the play of light on ripples. You recall that Plato once compared time to a moving image of eternity. You suspect he might have said that while listening to a water clock somewhere in the academy. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Greek taverns used small clepsydrae to measure drinking games. Each guest had to finish their cup before the last drop fell, or else pay for the next round. Imagine Socrates debating ethics while someone yells, "Hurry up, the water's almost gone." By midday, the heat thickens. You find refuge beneath a colonnade where an astronomer, older, stooped, his robes flecked with dust, sits beside an elaborate bronze contraption. This, he says, tapping a cylinder with holes and spouts, is the improved clepsydra of Clepsybius. You recognize the name, Clepsybius of Alexandria, 3rd century BCE, the father of pneumatic engineering. He invented the first self-regulating water clock, an early step toward automation. His design kept a constant flow by balancing air pressure and water levels. Some even chimed bells or moved small figures as hours passed. You stare in wonder. Time made visible, audible, mechanical. The astronomer pours water in and gestures for silence. A gentle hiss and gurgle, then a stream begins, perfectly steady. It never hurries, never falters, he says. Better than most men. He laughs softly. You nod, entranced by the smooth precision, the first heartbeat of what will one day become the modern clock. But even here, with all this clever engineering, the Greek attitude toward time remains humble. The astronomer shrugs. We don't command time, he says. We imitate it. His eyes twinkle. Historians still argue whether Ctesippus meant to measure hours or honor the gods of order, perhaps both. Later, as evening cools the stones, you pass back through the courthouse. The young attendant is sweeping up, humming the same tune he did that morning. He shows you another trick. He dips his finger into the last puddle in the clock's basin and flicks it toward the setting sun. For luck, he says, so that tomorrow flows as steadily as today. You linger a while, watching the sky shift from gold to indigo. The last traders are closing stalls. A donkey brays in protest. In this quiet hour, the 11th maybe, you realize something. The Greeks didn't just use time. They listened to it. They turned it into sound, into rhythm, into something alive. Plink, plink, plink. That's time, ancient and unhurried. Not the digital buzz you know, not a countdown or deadline, just the patient music of water finding its way. And maybe that's the secret the Greeks understood better than anyone. Time doesn't march, it flows. It meanders through our lives, seeps into our routines, wears down even marble in the end. You can't grasp it, you can only cup your hands and let it trickle through, cool and clean, before it moves on. Somewhere deep in the night, another clepsydra starts again. The next day drifts into motion like a slow tide, pulling you toward the hum of the agora, the great open market of Athens. You can hear it before you see it, the chatter of voices, the soft thud of sandals on dusty stone, the clinking of pottery, the bray of an irritated donkey announcing his opinion about commerce. The air tastes of olives, honey, and grilled fish, and somewhere nearby, a harpist is doing his best to sound awake. You step into the sunlight, blinking. The marketplace stretches around you like a living clock, though there are no bells, no ticking, not even a sundial in sight. And yet, everything here runs perfectly on time, just not the kind of time you're used to. A baker pulls hot loaves from his clay oven, the crusts cracking in the heat. He nods to you and says, "You're late. Breakfast hour's already done." He's joking, though you suspect he means it. Here, the rhythm of the day isn't counted in numbers, but in moments. When the bread's ready, when the market fills, when the sun climbs to a certain angle, and the shadows fall across the statue of Athena in just the right way. You wander between stalls, surrounded by the pulse of marketplace rhythms. The blacksmith's hammer rings like a heartbeat. A woman selling figs sings a quick rhyme to draw customers. Two philosophers argue about the nature of virtue beside a vegetable cart. This is Athens' version of morning rush hour, only without the rush. At the heart of it all, a small public sundial stands near a fountain, gleaming in the light. Its shadow cuts across the stone, almost swallowed by the noise around it. You notice people glance at it as they pass, but no one stops to stare. It's more of a reassurance than a command, a friendly reminder from the sun saying, "Yes, you're roughly where you should be." The merchant beside you, arranging bright oranges, laughs. "That shadow says it's almost the 5th hour," he tells you. Or maybe the 4th, depends on who you ask. He wipes his hands on his tunic. But really, we know because the fishmonger is already packing up. He gestures across the plaza, where a stout man is covering his baskets with damp cloths. The fish go bad when the shadow of the Hermes statue reaches his stall, he explains, grinning. That's his clock. You realize everyone here has their own private timepiece, made not of gears, but of sunlight and routine. The olive cellar closes when the temple bells ring in the distance. The potter down the row stops working when the breeze changes and brings the smell of evening fires. And the philosophers? They start their debates right after lunch and continue until someone falls asleep mid-argument. Mainstream historical fact: the Greek agora wasn't just a market, it was the social heart of the city. People came not only to trade goods, but to exchange news, gossip, and philosophy. Meetings of the assembly, casual trials, and religious processions all happened here. It was a living schedule of civic life, organized loosely around the sun. You pause near a stall selling herbs, thyme, rosemary, dried mint bundled with twine. The merchant looks up. "Don't breathe too quickly," she advises with mock solemnity. "You'll run out of hours before noon." You laugh, but it feels oddly profound. There's something soothing about this elastic version of time, one where no minute is wasted because there are no minutes to begin with. The hum of the market continues, but it's not chaotic, it's rhythmic. You can sense the unspoken choreography: slaves fetching water from the fountain at predictable intervals, children darting between stalls before the heat grows unbearable, street musicians shifting closer to shaded walls as the sun climbs. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some ancient Greek cities had time criers, public heralds who announced significant parts of the day. They didn't shout numbers, they simply called out cues like, "It's time to close the baths," or "The assembly gathers soon." Think of them as the world's first push notifications, except more polite and probably better dressed. You grab a cup of watered wine from a vendor. The liquid is cool, slightly tart. You lean against a column and watch how the crowd shifts subtly as shadows grow longer. The morning traders fade, the afternoon thinkers arrive. The marketplace breathes in and out like a living organism, one lungful per sunrise. You notice that certain activities seem to happen at the same feeling of time each day. The orators tend to gather when the sunlight strikes the upper part of the Stoa of Adelos, the shaded walkway where political debates unfold. Artists sketch at that hour too, chasing the same gentle light. And as the air grows thick with heat, even the loudest haggler slows his speech. The market quiets slightly in the early afternoon. Some stalls close altogether. People retreat indoors or under awnings. "We rest," the orange merchant says simply. "Even the gods nap after the 6th hour." He laughs and waves you off, disappearing behind his curtain. You wander through the half-empty agora, now quieter, shimmering with heat. The sound of sandals scuffing stone mingles with the cooing of pigeons. The fountain still flows steadily, a miniature water clock, unnoticed but constant. You sit beside it, the cool spray misting your face, and let the rhythm of droplets merge with your breathing. You can almost feel yourself sinking with the marketplace pulse, the ancient tempo of life that's equal parts work and waiting. Somewhere nearby, a philosopher's voice floats on the air. "Historians still argue," he says, as if addressing you directly, "whether our days have grown shorter or our patience thinner." His students chuckle politely, unsure if it's a joke. "But time," he continues, "is like a marketplace. We trade it away piece by piece, and sometimes forget to ask what it's worth." You smile. He's right, of course. Even 2,000 years later, not much has changed. You still buy and sell your hours, only now the currency is clicks and notifications instead of figs and fish. The philosopher pauses, then adds, "In truth, the gods gave us just enough daylight to do what matters and enough darkness to regret what didn't." His students murmur agreement, though one looks suspiciously like he's calculating how long until dinner. As the afternoon wanes, the agora fills again, this time with different energy. Performers take the empty spaces, jugglers, flute players, poets reading verses to small crowds. Children chase each other through the columns. The city seems to wake for a second time, its second wind of daylight before evening steals it away. The shadows lengthen. The sundial near the fountain points at its final groove. You notice the merchants beginning to gather their wares, tying bundles with rope, stacking amphorae for tomorrow. There's no rush, no urgency, just the slow ritual of ending the day. A woman selling candles lights one early, the flame flickering gold against her face. "You know," she says, "when I was little, I thought the sun set because the gods ran out of hours." She laughs softly. "Now I think they just got tired of counting." The sky deepens to rose and gold. The agora transforms once more. Less a market now, more a meeting ground for talk and music. Men with lyres sit on the steps, women trade recipes and gossip, children chase shadows that stretch endlessly before fading. You find yourself smiling without meaning to. There's something deeply human about this rhythm, this refusal to be ruled by the mechanical. Time here is alive. It breathes, sings, wanders. It fills the spaces between people like air or laughter. As torches are lit and the first stars appear above the Acropolis, you lean back against the column. The last echoes of the market fade. Somewhere, water trickles, steady as always. You close your eyes, and for a moment you can feel it. The heartbeat of an ancient city, pulsing not with minutes or seconds, but with life itself. The next morning dawns with the soft bronze of early light spilling over the Acropolis. The marble temples glow faintly pink, and the faint ringing of a distant bell, or perhaps a priest's bronze gong, floats across the city. The air smells faintly of smoke and wild thyme, and as you climb toward the sacred hill, you realize this day doesn't belong to merchants or philosophers, it belongs to the gods. A priestess passes you on the steps, carrying a basket of barley. Her white robes whisper against the stone, and the folds catch the sunlight in a way that almost blinds you. Behind her, two temple attendants balance long bronze basins of water between them, their sandals clinking softly on the flagstones. They're setting up for a morning purification rite, and you're about to see how the Greeks use time not just for life, but for worship. The Greeks lived in a world measured by ritual rhythms. Each month, each day, even each hour had its sacred character. Some days were for sacrifice, others for rest. Certain hours were favorable for beginnings, starting a journey, planting a crop, or making an offering. Others were best avoided. Time wasn't empty, it was alive, filled with the moods of gods, the patterns of stars, and the turning of unseen forces. As you reach the top of the hill, you can hear a chorus of women chanting softly within the temple precinct. Their voices rise and fall like the tide, echoing through the colonnade. The sound feels measured, deliberate, almost mathematical. In a sense, it is. Every prayer, every offering, every step is timed. A gray-haired priest notices you and smiles faintly. "You've arrived just in time," he says. "The libation is about to begin." He gestures for you to join him at the edge of the marble platform. A young boy approaches, holding a small clay vessel of wine. "Watch carefully," the priest murmurs. "We pour when the sun clears the temple roof, not before." You follow his gaze. The first sliver of sunlight touches the statue of Athena, gilded bronze catching fire. The priest raises his arm, the crowd falls silent, and the wine flows in a steady ribbon onto the ground. The scent rises, sweet and sharp, carried by the breeze. "The gods do not wear watches," he says quietly, "but they expect punctuality." You smile, unsure if he's joking. In ancient Greece, religion and time were inseparable. The calendar itself was born from ritual needs. Most Greek cities used a luni-solar calendar, built on the cycles of the moon and the solar year. A month began with the first sliver of the new moon, visible in the evening sky. 12 months made a year. But because lunar months didn't neatly fit the solar cycle, cities occasionally added an extra month to keep festivals aligned with the seasons. Each city-state had its own version. Athens used the Attic calendar, beginning in midsummer, when the first new moon followed the summer solstice. The months carried names that echoed festivals. Hekatombion, for the great sacrifice to Zeus, Boedromion, for Apollo the Helper, and Thesterion, for the festival of new wine. To live in Athens was to live by this rhythm of sacred time, where divine celebrations marked the passing of the year more clearly than numbers or seasons. Today, you're witnessing one of those turning points. The festival of Thargelia, a celebration for Apollo and Artemis, is approaching. In the streets below, citizens are already preparing garlands and cleaning the public fountains. You can hear the hum of activity even from the temple steps. The priest explains that before the festival, two chosen figures, called pharmakoi, will be symbolically expelled from the city to cleanse it of pollution. The day after that, he says, we feast. We always feast after purification. The gods like order, but they love joy more. He chuckles softly and turns to adjust the sundial mounted near the temple's outer wall. You notice its markings are faint, almost worn smooth. We know when the shadow reaches this groove, he says, pointing, it's time to begin the hymn to Apollo. It strikes you how naturally they merge spiritual practice and solar observation. The same shadow that told a merchant when to sell his figs now tells a priest when to sing. Time here isn't divided between sacred and ordinary, it flows seamlessly between them. As the ceremony continues, more worshippers gather. A group of farmers arrives from the countryside, carrying baskets of grain. We've brought the first harvest, one tells the priest. The moon is right. You glance upward. The moon, pale and ghost-like, hangs low in the blue morning sky. Its phase determines not only festivals, but even mundane acts like pruning vines or cutting timber. The Greeks believed each stage of the moon carried a divine energy, waxing for beginnings, full for strength, waning for endings. And so, in this world, time itself becomes moral, a guide for behavior and intention. Certain days are unlucky, some are blessed. The seventh day of each month, for instance, was sacred to Apollo. No important business or warfare should begin before that day had passed. Farmers refused to sow or harvest on impure days, marked carefully in the city's public calendar. This isn't superstition so much as rhythm, a deep respect for harmony between human action and cosmic order. Later that day, you wander down from the Acropolis toward the city Eleusinion, the sanctuary connected to the mysteries of Demeter. A procession is forming, young women in bright cloaks, each carrying a small basket of barley or myrtle. They walk in slow time, every step deliberate, every gesture part of a choreography that has been repeated for centuries. You fall into step beside an older woman who smiles knowingly. You can tell the hour by the procession, she says. We always reach the fountain at midday. The sun watches us, and we watch it back. At the fountain, they stop to wash their hands and faces. The air shimmers with heat. A few children giggle as they splash water on one another, earning gentle scolds from their elders. Not too soon, the woman murmurs, nodding toward the temple ahead. The gates must open at the right moment. You look up and notice a shadow creeping across the temple threshold. When it finally touches the inner step, the great bronze doors swing open and the crowd exhales as one. No bell, no announcement, just the silent choreography of sunlight and stone. Inside, the smell of grain and incense fills the air. Offerings are laid in neat rows. The priests move methodically, their motions almost hypnotic. A young acolyte rings a small bronze bell at intervals, not to mark time, but to signal transitions in the ritual, from offering to prayer, from silence to song. The rhythm feels eternal, yet fragile. You can imagine this same sound ringing centuries ago, when these people's ancestors stood in the same spot, watching the same shadows. As dusk falls, the city below begins to glow with hundreds of oil lamps. The day's sacred activities give way to gentle music and conversation. On rooftops, people recline on woven mats, watching the first stars appear. You sit beside the same priest from earlier, now older looking in the dim light. He pours you a little wine and gestures toward the horizon. "Look," he says, "when the dog star rises, we'll know the new month begins." He points at the faint shimmer of Sirius just climbing above the hills. "It always returns," he says softly. "The gods send it to remind us that time is not lost, only waiting." The breeze carries the scent of myrtle and cooling stone. From the city below, a distant flute plays a slow, wandering melody. It sounds like something between a lullaby and a prayer. You realize, sitting there, that to the Greeks, time was never empty space. It was sacred territory, patterned and alive. Each dawn a renewal, each night a promise. Their world moved not to seconds or hours, but to cycles of moon and sun, planting and harvest, prayer and silence. You close your eyes and imagine what it must have been like to live this way, to feel time not rushing past, but spiraling gently, endlessly, like the stars turning above the Parthenon. The priest raises his cup one last time. "Tomorrow," he says, "the sun will rise for Apollo's day, and we will begin again, just as we always have." He smiles faintly. The gods are never late. You breathe out slowly, the sound of temple bells mingling with the wind, and for a moment, just before sleep tugs you under, you can almost believe that somewhere, beyond the ticking of modern clocks, sacred time still keeps its patient rhythm. You wake to the sound of distant horns and shouting men. The air feels electric, pulsing with excitement. You're standing on a dusty road that snakes through the Peloponnesian countryside, lined with olive trees and wildflowers. Ahead, the horizon shimmers in the morning light, and far off, you see the outline of Mount Kronos, the watchful hill above Olympia. The games are near. It's the year when the Greeks, scattered across hundreds of rival city-states, will pause their wars, their politics, even their grudges, to gather in one place, to honor Zeus with contests of strength, speed, and skill. For a few precious days, peace is guaranteed by the sacred Ekacheria, the Olympic truce. And as you join the crowd trudging toward the sanctuary, you realize how the Greeks measured time not by clocks or calendars, but by events like this, the steady rhythm of festivals that united generations. A young man beside you adjusts the strap on his satchel. "This is my first games," he says proudly. "I trained for 2 years, under the full moons." You nod, realizing that even his preparation has been timed by celestial markers. The rising of Sirius, the dog star, announced the hottest part of summer, and with it, the traditional moment when athletes began their final phase of training. The games themselves always fell during the second or third full moon after the solstice. The organizers didn't consult gears or sandglasses, they looked up, waiting for the moon's face to swell just enough. As you walk, a merchant trudges past, balancing amphorae of wine on his shoulders. He mutters that he's late, blaming the slow caravan. Someone laughs and says, "The gods will start the races when they please." Everyone chuckles. Nobody seems too worried about being on time. The sun, after all, will decide that. By midday, the valley of Olympia opens before you, bright and crowded. Tents sprout like mushrooms along the riverbank, and the scent of roasted meat drifts in the air. The soundscape is a jumble of languages, Dorian, Ionian, Aeolian, yet all share the same rhythm, that easy, timeless flow of anticipation. You follow the crowd into the Altis, the sacred grove of Zeus. At its center rises a massive temple of gleaming marble, and before it, a statue so tall it nearly grazes the roof. Phidias is Zeus, seated on a golden throne. They say the god's eyes seem to follow you, weighing whether you'll honor his festival properly or fall asleep before the final race. A herald blows a long bronze trumpet. The first event, the Stadion foot race, is about to begin. But before any athlete runs, before a discus is thrown or a wrestler grapples, the officials gather in the temple courtyard to mark the time. One priest steps forward with a small bronze sundial. Another unrolls a chart of lunar phases scratched on wax. The third day of the full moon, he announces, let the contests begin. No stopwatch, no numbered date, just the dance of light and shadow, the curve of the moon, and the slow turning of the heavens. You stand beside an old man who seems to be explaining the system to his grandson. The games are every 4 years, he says. We count time by them. My father was born the year of the 75th Olympiad, your uncle during the 76th. It dawns on you that this is more than sport. It's a calendar itself, the heartbeat of Hellenic time. The word Olympiad will later mark whole spans of history, anchoring events and memories. When a poet recalls a victory, he says not in the year 476, but in the third year of the 94th Olympiad. To the Greeks, time doesn't march. It gathers, festival by festival, like beads on a string. The crowd swells as the runners line up. You can smell the oil glistening on their skin, catch the faint tang of sweat and dust. The priest raises his hand toward the sun. It's almost directly overhead. Noon, the perfect moment. On your marks, he says softly. And they're off. Sand flies, muscles coil and release, and in the blink of an eye, one man crosses the line first. The spectators cheer, waving olive branches. The victor raises his arms, and for a heartbeat, everything freezes, the moment suspended in golden sunlight. You find yourself grinning. There's something hypnotic about the simplicity of it. No ticking seconds, no digital replay, just the raw immediacy of motion and breath. Nearby, a philosopher-looking man in a dusty himation murmurs, "Time is motion, my friend. Aristotle will write that someday." Then he squints at the track. "Though I suppose if you move faster, you make more time." He chuckles at his own joke. A teenage boy next to you whispers, "Historians still argue whether the first race lasted a single lap or 2. You nod solemnly. It's oddly comforting that even 2,000 years later, people will still be debating the fine print. As the day unfolds, the rhythm of the games becomes almost musical. Trumpet calls, cheers, the thud of bare feet, all beating to the same natural meter. Between events, priests pour libations and recite prayers, keeping the festival aligned with the celestial signs. The athletes rest under awnings, timing their meals by the sun's position. When dusk comes, torches flare to life. The crowd gathers for evening ceremonies, and the stars emerge like polished coins scattered across a deep indigo sky. You find yourself seated near the altar of Hestia, where a single sacred flame burns constantly, fed through every hour and every Olympiad. It's said that even during wars, that flame was never extinguished. A priestess tends it carefully, adding oil and whispering a hymn. This is the heart of time, she tells you. As long as the fire burns, the rhythm of the games continues. When it goes out, we will know the gods have grown tired of men's contests. Her words linger. You realize how fire and time are bound together here, both alive only as long as they're fed. The next morning, the sun rises red over the Alpheus River. Trumpets sound again. Today is the day of the chariot races, and the whole sanctuary hums with energy. You join the crowd near the hippodrome, where the track stretches wide and dusty. The drivers stand barefoot beside their teams, 4 horses each, restless and gleaming. As they mount the chariots, an announcer raises a hand. When the shadow of Zeus's temple reaches the edge of the starting post, he declares, the race begins. You glance back. A tall column casts its shadow across the field, sliding inch by inch closer to the mark. The crowd holds its breath. And then, just as the shadow kisses the line, the first driver cracks his whip and thunder erupts. The ground shakes, horses scream, wheels spin. The sound is deafening, exhilarating. You can't help but laugh, though dust fills your mouth. A woman beside you mutters, "That one's doomed. He started too soon. Zeus sees all." Sure enough, his chariot clips a wheel and overturns spectacularly. The crowd gasps, then cheers again. Time here feels elastic, bending between chaos and stillness, heartbeat to heartbeat. When the final event ends, the victors gather before the altar, olive wreaths placed on their heads. The crowd roars approval. The setting sun washes everything in bronze light, and for a moment, the whole world seems to stand still. A herald lifts his staff and shouts, "The 104th Olympiad is complete." The crowd answers in unison, "May Zeus remember!" And that's it, the ultimate Greek timestamp. The year has meaning only because of what was done in this moment. Every chronicle, every inscription carved into marble will now refer to this cycle of games. For the Greeks, this is not just an event, it's how eternity keeps score. As night settles, you wander away from the stadium, past the sleeping tents and the quiet riverbank. Crickets hum, and the faint murmur of storytelling drifts through the dark. Somewhere, someone is already recounting today's victories, ensuring they'll live until the next Olympiad and beyond. You look up at the stars, those same slow, ancient markers of time, and wonder how many cycles they've witnessed, how many races, how many summers, how many hearts quickening in the dust of Olympia. A warm breeze rustles the olive trees, and you hear the faint voice of the priestess again. The gods will start the races when they please. You smile, realizing she was right. The Greeks didn't chase time. They met it, head on, every 4 years, in perfect rhythm with the heavens. And as the sacred flame flickers through the night, you drift into the steady, timeless heartbeat of the games themselves, measured not in minutes, but in meaning. Morning drips gently from the sky like honey when you find yourself on a dusty track winding through the Greek countryside. The air smells of warm hay, figs, and olive leaves crushed beneath your sandals. You've left behind the marble temples and loud marketplaces of the city. Out here, the sun reigns supreme, and time keeps its rhythm, not with bells or shadows on stone, but with the turning of seasons and the hum of cicadas. Ahead, an old man waves from the edge of a vineyard. His tunic is the color of earth, and his hands look as though they've been sculpted from it. "Come, stranger," he calls. "You're just in time. The dew's still on the vines." You follow him into the rows of grapevines, each heavy with green clusters that catch the early light like glass beads. The man plucks one, tastes it, and nods to himself. 2 weeks more, he says. The moon will tell us when to begin the harvest. You raise an eyebrow. The moon? He chuckles softly. You city folk measure time by shadows on stone. We measure by how sweet the grapes taste when the full moon rises in metagetnion. That's roughly August by modern reckoning, but to him, it's simply the moment when the earth whispers, "now." For farmers like him, the Greeks' understanding of time was a living, breathing thing, seasonal, cyclical, and deeply personal. You help him tie a few vine branches, the air warming as the sun climbs. Everything follows the sun, he explains. When it moves north, we sow. When it turns back, we reap. You can almost see it, the whole agricultural year dancing around Helios's daily chariot, dragging light across the sky. And when that journey tilts, when the days shorten, when shadows lengthen, the farmers adjust their pace accordingly. Out here, time isn't an abstract measure, it's tactile. It smells like fresh wheat, feels like rough bark, and sounds like the rhythmic swish of a sickle. He points toward the horizon, where faint hills blur in the morning haze. That ridge there, when the sun rises behind it, it's time to plant barley. But when it rises over the river, we let the soil rest. It's a remarkable system, a rural clock built from geography and memory, tuned not to seconds or minutes, but to cycles of light and land. At midday, you sit beneath an olive tree, sharing bread, cheese, and figs with the farmer and his wife. She's humming softly, a tune that turns out to be more than a song. It's a calendar in disguise. Every verse tells us when to do something, she explains. When Orion rises, we shear the sheep. When the Pleiades vanish, we gather the grain. She smiles. We don't need scribes or tablets. The stars sing the schedule to us.
Indeed, in Hesiod's Works and Days, a kind of farmer's almanac from the 8th century BCE, each phase of the agricultural year is pegged to constellations and cosmic events. When the Pleiades rise, he wrote, begin your harvest. When they set, begin your plowing. It's not poetic exaggeration, it's timekeeping by constellation. You look up at the sky, though it's still bright with day, and imagine those faint clusters that once guided entire civilizations. To the Greeks, the heavens were not distant. They were the clock face of the world.
The farmer wipes his hands on his tunic and says, Historians still argue whether Hesiod's advice was universal or local. Our hills have their own moods, you see. He shrugs, as if amused by the idea of distant scholars puzzling over what every goat herder already knows. You bite into a fig and taste the sun. It's soft, syrupy, and faintly gritty with seeds, an edible fragment of time itself. After lunch, the farmer leads you to the threshing floor, a wide circular patch of packed earth. A donkey trudges around in slow circles, pulling a wooden sledge studded with flint. The air fills with the sweet, dusty scent of crushed grain. This, the farmer says, is the sound of summer dying. You listen, the scrape, the shuffle, the rhythmic snort of the donkey. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. We'll work until the evening star rises, he adds. After that, the day belongs to the night, and the night belongs to the gods. You ask how he keeps track of so many natural cues. He grins. You don't track them, you live them. When the wind changes, when the crickets grow louder, when the river shrinks, you just know. He tosses a handful of grain into the air. The sunlight catches it, turning it to gold dust. See? The wind from the north. Harvest will be good this year. For a moment, you envy him. The simplicity, the patience, the rhythm. In a world where time now ticks relentlessly from digital screens, the farmer's clock feels luxurious. It moves at the pace of ripening fruit and lengthening shadows. As afternoon stretches thin and golden, his daughter returns from the well, balancing a clay jar on her head. She pauses, watching the sunlight on the fields. Father, she says, the swallows are flying low again. He nods. Then rain is near. Tomorrow we'll bring in the hay. You follow her gaze and see it too, the erratic flight of birds across the sky, small messengers of atmospheric change. Even the animals become keepers of time. Later, the family gathers by a small hearth outside their house. The smell of burning olive wood mixes with that of roasting onions. The farmer takes a sip of wine and says, "Each year repeats, but never the same. That's the trick. The gods change the tempo, and we try to keep up." You ask him which god rules over the seasons. He chuckles softly. Depends who you ask. Some say Demeter because she mourns her daughter each winter. Others say Helios because his path shortens and lengthens. But me? He gestures toward the sky, where dusk is deepening into violet. I say Kronos himself, not the titan of time, but the quiet, endless flow of it. You can't worship time directly, you just listen to it. His wife adds, and try not to anger it. As night settles, the cicadas fade, replaced by the hooting of owls. The farmer points upward, where the first stars blink awake. There, he says, see the hunter? When he rises, winter is near. When he falls, the vines will bloom again. You lie back on the grass, feeling the earth still warm from the day. The constellations turn slowly overhead, steady and eternal. Somewhere, a shepherd's flute begins to play a slow, lilting melody, simple, repetitive, like the passage of months. For these people, the year isn't a line, it's a circle. Time always loops back. The plow becomes the harvest, which becomes the feast, which becomes the plow again. There's comfort in that repetition, a kind of cosmic lullaby. And just as you start to feel that rhythm sink into your own pulse, the farmer's voice drifts toward you one last time. Sleep well, stranger. The stars will keep time for you. You close your eyes, hearing the whisper of wind through olive leaves and the faint rustle of wheat fields breathing in the dark. Somewhere out there, the moon is climbing again, counting down to another season, another cycle, another dawn. No alarm clock, no deadlines, just the patient ticking of the world itself. Sun, moon, soil, and breath, all turning together in their endless, ancient rhythm. When morning light first spills over the marble hills of Athens, it finds its way down into a vast, crescent-shaped hollow carved into the southern slope of the Acropolis. Here, beneath the open sky, thousands of people begin to gather. They come wrapped in cloaks, carrying bread, olives, and wine, murmuring softly as they find their seats among the smooth stone benches. The scent of crushed thyme drifts through the air. This is not a festival of war or harvest. It is a festival of time itself, a living clock that measures the rhythm of the gods through drama. You find yourself seated among them, the stone cool beneath your hands. Before you stretches the theater of Dionysus, where tragedy and comedy are not simply performances, but markers of the year's turning, tied to the agricultural calendar, the religious cycle, and the communal heartbeat of the city. A priest of Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and transformation, steps forward and pours a libation upon the altar. The crowd quiets. A chorus begins to chant, their voices weaving through the cool morning air like the first threads of a tapestry. In this world, the theater isn't entertainment, it's a ritualized reckoning of time, a mirror in which the Greeks glimpse the endless patterns of fate, mortality, and renewal. The farmer you met in the countryside would measure time by stars and soil, but here in Athens, time unfolds on the stage. The plays performed during the Great Dionysia each spring are part of a sacred calendar, carefully placed after the planting of the vines, before the new wine begins to ferment. The timing is no accident. Dionysus embodies both chaos and renewal, the yearly death of nature and its joyful rebirth. When his festivals arrive, the city itself seems to breathe differently. Shops close, courts suspend their sessions. Even politics, that constant hum of debate and decision, pauses. For several days, Athens belongs not to the philosophers or the generals, but to the poets, to Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and to the audience, who will experience through them the turning of divine time. The first play begins. Drums roll. The chorus enters, their feet striking the earth in a rhythm that feels both ancient and eternal. The actors, masked and robed, are not individuals but vessels of myth, heroes who live and die within the fixed cycle of human destiny. You can feel it even as you listen. Greek tragedy is not about suspense, it's about inevitability. Everyone in the theater already knows how the story ends. Oedipus will discover his crime. Agamemnon will fall to his wife's blade. Medea will take her revenge. Yet still they watch, not to learn what happens, but to experience the rhythm of what must happen. It's as though time, for the Greeks, is not a river that flows forward, but a wheel that turns forever. The same stories returning, reshaped each season, each year. A man beside you, a bearded Athenian with a philosopher's calm eyes, leans over. "You see," he says softly, "the gods repeat their lessons until we remember them. The play is the clock. We come here to watch it turn." You ask him what he means, and he smiles. Each year, when Dionysus returns, so do these tales. And we, poor mortals, play our small parts again. What is life, after all, but a drama in the theater of time? He laughs gently, and his words linger long after the chorus resumes its chant. The air grows heavy with incense, and the beating of drums echoes against the stone. You begin to feel the strange sensation that the play's rhythm has synchronized with your heartbeat. The tragedy ends not with applause, but with silence. A silence so complete it seems to swallow the world. Then, slowly, people rise, blinking in the sunlight, their faces softened, contemplative. Some weep quietly, others simply look to the sky. For them, this is not catharsis in the modern sense. It is alignment. The drama purges excess emotion, yes, but it also restores balance, just as the seasons restore order after chaos. The city breathes again, ready for another year. As afternoon stretches toward evening, you wander behind the theater where workers dismantle props and masks. A young stagehand, barefoot, his tunic smeared with dust, points toward the horizon. "See how the light changes?" he says. "When the sun touches that hill, we stop. That's Dionysus's signal." You watch the glow creep along the marble until it kisses the hilltop. The boy nods solemnly. "That's how we know the day is over, not by a water clock or a sundial, but by the god's light." He smiles. "You can't measure time here, you can only feel it." The following day, the mood shifts. The comedies begin, laughter rippling through the same amphitheater where tragedy had reigned. Men in ridiculous costumes shout clever insults. Women disguise themselves as politicians. Even the gods are parodied. This, too, is sacred, for the Greeks believed that laughter was as necessary to time as sorrow. Just as winter must yield to spring, grief must give way to joy. The comedies are not mere mockery. They are the counterweight to tragedy, the balancing force that keeps the year from tipping into despair. As the crowd laughs, you find yourself thinking of the farmer's wife and her songs that tracked the seasons. Comedy, you realize, is another kind of song, one that celebrates survival, the return of life, the continuation of the cycle. At the edge of the stage, a group of children tosses flower petals, shouting lines they've memorized from their favorite scenes. Their laughter feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. When night falls again, you walk alone through the quiet streets of Athens. The air is heavy with the smell of lamp oil and dust. Somewhere, a lyre is being played softly, a tune that sounds almost like a lullaby. Above you, the Acropolis gleams faintly under the moon, and below it, the empty theater sits in stillness, its rows of stone glowing pale, like the inside of a seashell. You imagine it filled again, the crowd, the chorus, the masks, the rhythm of voices. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the city in those echoes, a pulse that beats in perfect time with the stars overhead. For the Greeks, art was never separate from time. It was time, made visible, audible, and human. Through their plays, they didn't just tell stories. They synchronized their lives with the eternal patterns of fate and renewal. Tomorrow, the markets will open again. The courts will resume. Farmers will return to their fields. But tonight, Athens rests, caught in that rare, shimmering pause between acts, between seasons, between the ending of one story and the beginning of another. As you make your way back toward the harbor, you think of all the ways time has shown itself to you. In water clocks, in the stars, in harvest songs, in the steps of a chorus. You realize that for the ancient Greeks, time was not a straight road, but a performance, a drama endlessly reenacted by gods and mortals alike. And like any good play, it demands presence. You cannot rush through it or skip ahead. You must sit, watch, listen, and let the rhythm carry you. Somewhere behind you, a faint breeze stirs through the theater seats, whispering through the marble like a sigh. The last of the torches flickers out. For a heartbeat, everything is still. Then, quietly, the night begins again, soft, patient, eternal. The theater empties as dawn comes again, and you follow the slow rhythm of sandals and chatter down the marble steps toward the agora. The air still smells faintly of burnt incense and wine. Athens, for all its noise and arguments, wakes gently. and like most mornings, it wakes into conversation. You pass a cluster of men leaning against a column, arguing about something that seems both trivial and cosmic. Words like chronos and kairos drift through the air. One man gestures toward the rising sun. Another laughs, "You can't point at time." You decide to follow the sound of their voices, which lead you to a small courtyard shaded by olive trees. There, a few students sit cross-legged around a man in a simple cloak, balding, barefoot, with the patient expression of someone who enjoys asking questions more than answering them. It's Socrates, and, unsurprisingly, he's late. He chuckles as he sits. If we cannot measure time without tools, then perhaps being late does not exist, he says. The students laugh politely. One of them, more serious, asks, "But master, what is time?" Socrates sighs. You begin with the impossible. That's always the best way to spend a morning." And so you sit among them, leaning against a tree, listening as Athens, city of reason and restless minds, tries to make sense of the most elusive thing in the world. The discussion drifts like morning mist. Socrates proposes that maybe time is just how humans measure change. That if nothing moved, if nothing aged, if nothing grew, we'd never know time existed. A younger man shakes his head. Then time is motion, he insists. But motion can stop. Time never does. They argue back and forth, voices gentle but intent. You can almost see their thoughts tracing invisible diagrams in the air. "Perhaps," says Socrates at last, "time is a mirror. It shows us change, but it does not change itself." Historians still argue whether Socrates ever truly cared about defining time. Some think he used the question merely to stir minds, to test the limits of logic. Others suspect he believed that the soul lived outside time entirely, that wisdom meant glimpsing something eternal behind the ticking of moments. You shift on the stone bench, half sleepy, half fascinated. The courtyard hums with bees, the olive leaves trembling slightly. Somewhere nearby, a woman calls out the hour from a window, judging by the length of her shadow. The world continues, unbothered by philosophy. Later, when Socrates leaves, his students continue arguing. One insists that time flows like a river, smooth, unstoppable, always moving toward the sea of the future. Another counters that it's not a river at all, but a circle, endlessly looping back upon itself. You remember the theater, the chorus repeating ancient lines? Maybe that second student has a point. Then a voice, deeper, confident, like marble speaking, interrupts them. It belongs to a man you recognize from countless statues and coins, Plato, one of Socrates' students, now a philosopher in his own right. Time, he says calmly, is the moving image of eternity. Everyone falls silent. It sounds profound, so profound that even Plato seems to savor the echo of his own words. He explains that beyond our changing world lies a perfect realm of forms, eternal and unchanging. What we call time, he says, is a copy, a reflection of eternity cast onto the imperfect mirror of reality. You can't help smiling. Philosophers, you think, have an uncanny ability to make things sound clearer and more confusing at the same time. Plato gestures upward. The heavens move in perfect circles. The gods, who are immortal, created time so mortals could imitate eternity, if only faintly. The planets spinning like gears in a cosmic clock, each revolution marking divine order. To the Greeks, the sky wasn't just decoration. It was a calendar written in fire. And yet, you notice, even the philosophers measure their lessons by the sun's path across the courtyard. When the shade reaches the edge of the marble bench, Plato nods. "Enough for today," he says. "Time demands lunch." You wander from the courtyard toward the edge of the city, where small workshops clatter with the sound of bronze hammers. Here, practical men have their own opinions about time. A craftsman polishing a water clock, its smooth clay surface glistening in the heat, grins at you. Philosophers can argue about eternity all they want, he says, but if the water stops dripping, their speeches end. He's right, of course. Philosophy may try to define time, but daily life must keep it. In courts, in workshops, in households, the clepsydra still rules with quiet precision. A steady drip for justice, another for boiling lentils. You watch him adjust the hole at the base of the vessel. See, it's all about flow, he says. Too wide, and it races. Too narrow, and it sleeps. You think of Socrates' metaphor, a mirror of change. Perhaps this water clock is that mirror in miniature. The flow shows time not as an abstract idea, but as something you can hold, hear, and lose drop by drop. That night, you find yourself at the academy, a grove where Plato teaches under the stars. The air hums with crickets, torches flicker. Students recline on mats, debating softly as the constellations shift above them. Someone mentions Parmenides, who claimed that time is an illusion, that everything which ever happens is already complete, motionless, eternal. Another quotes Heraclitus, the philosopher of fire. You cannot step into the same river twice. The argument flares again, and you can't help chuckling. They have been circling this same question for decades, perhaps centuries. Historians still argue whether any of them ever agreed on anything. Plato, with his serene half-smile, lets the discussion run. He seems to enjoy watching his students wrestle with contradictions, as if confusion were the natural language of truth. At last he speaks. Perhaps time is not what moves, he muses. Perhaps we move through it, like actors crossing a stage that never changes. The image lingers. You imagine the great amphitheater again, the sunlight moving across the stone, the chorus turning in rhythm, the audience aging one heartbeat at a time. Maybe the stage stays the same. Maybe it's only we who move. Later still, as the night deepens, you walk to the edge of the grove. The stars shimmer in the black sky. The moon, pale and deliberate, rises over Athens, marking another silent hour. You realize that the Greeks' obsession with time isn't about clocks or calendars, it's about meaning. They live in a world where time isn't just what happens between dawn and dusk. It's the canvas upon which gods paint fate and humans glimpse immortality. Even the philosophers, for all their logic, still look upward for answers. Time, to them, is both mathematical and mystical, a bridge between the human and the divine. As you sit beneath the olive trees, a breeze stirs the leaves, carrying the faint scent of the sea. You can almost believe that the air itself remembers all these conversations, that it hums with centuries of questions never fully answered. Perhaps time is not what they think at all. Perhaps it's this, the sound of wind in the trees, the hush of thought between sentences, the heartbeat that reminds you you're still here. The night grows cooler. Someone in the distance laughs softly. Another voice murmurs a line from Pindar. The shadow of smoke is man. You close your eyes, letting the words dissolve into the rhythm of crickets and the distant lapping of waves. Somewhere, just beyond hearing, a drop of water falls from a clepsydra. A chorus turns its final note. The stars drift slowly westward. And you realize, the Greeks were right about one thing. Time is not something you chase, it's something you join. Morning arrives again, soft and golden, sliding between the rooftops of Athens like warm honey. You step out into a street where the city hums with a quiet rhythm, one that has nothing to do with festivals, philosophers, or oracles. Here, the pulse of time is measured in the simple cadence of everyday life. Merchants opening their shops, bakers kneading dough, children running barefoot over stone paths, and the occasional bleat of a goat wandering from one courtyard to the next. You wander through the agora, the marketplace at the heart of the city. Stalls overflow with figs, olives, pottery, and trinkets that glint like scattered stars in the morning sun. The vendors call out in a lazy chorus, their voices rolling together like waves. Time here is practical, tangible, and immediate. Each day follows a pattern that has been repeated for generations. No clock necessary, only attention, memory, and habit. A baker leans over his table, shaping loaves of barley bread. He smiles at you, flour dusting his fingers. You see, he says, we rise before the sun, while the air is still cool. That's the best time to mix the dough. Too late, and it will stick. Too early, and it won't rise. You watch him, fascinated. It's the same lesson the farmers know. Time is an ally, not a number. The city pulses along this rhythm, every profession in harmony with light and air, heat and shadow. A young girl runs past you, carrying a basket of eggs. She glances at the sun, frowning. "The third crowing of the cocks," she mutters. "We'll be late for breakfast." It strikes you as funny. A child using natural signs to mark an hour. But it's perfectly normal here. No sundials, no water clocks, no mechanical precision. Just the body, the senses, and the city itself. In a nearby courtyard, a potter is finishing a vase. Each motion is deliberate. He spins the wheel, lets the clay rise, presses his fingers in just the right spots. When the sun tilts to a certain angle, he pauses to let the vase dry slightly. His apprentice watches the shadows carefully, learning the rhythm of light as if it were a teacher. You realize that the Greeks were masters of what we might now call habitual time, the flow of hours guided by daily needs, by the sun's climb and descent, and by the repeated cycles of work, rest, and nourishment. You stop at a fountain where women gather to draw water. They laugh quietly, exchanging news and gossip, their jars balanced expertly on their heads. One glances at her shadow and murmurs, "By now, the midday bread will be ready." You sip from the cool water and think about the intersection of public and private time. In Athens, personal routines are interwoven with communal rhythms. Everyone relies on one another's schedules, though no one carries a timepiece. The day progresses like a living organism, each part contributing to the whole: the market, the fountain, the workshop, the street. Even children understand it. Later, you watch a group playing knucklebones. The game begins when the sun has climbed high enough to cast a proper shadow, an unspoken marker of the hour. The boys and girls count and toss the bones, laughing, timing their turns without realizing it. Time has become playful, intuitive, and natural. By mid-morning, the agora has reached its peak. Merchants shout their prices, customers haggle, and the smell of roasted chickpeas drifts through the warm air. You notice that certain trades follow specific hours. The fishmonger opens early, catching the first sales before the sun dries the ice. The wine cellar waits for the afternoon, when customers linger and conversation drifts longer. Even funerals and weddings respect these informal schedules. A wedding might begin when the sun tilts a certain way over the city gates. A funeral when shadows stretch long toward the river. The Greeks mark life itself by patterns and cycles, not by mechanical counting. A young philosopher passes by, notebook in hand, scribbling observations. "Daily life," he mutters, "is a measure of habit, a rhythm of necessity, perhaps more important than the tick of a sundial." He smiles, obviously pleased with his own insight. You nod. There is poetry here in the ordinary. Even the mundane, sweeping the steps, tending a goat, fetching water, becomes a meditation on the passage of time. As the day stretches toward noon, the sun reaches its apex. The city slows. Windows are shaded. The aroma of cooking bread fills the air. Some people pause mid-task, resting in cool courtyards, letting time fold into itself. You wander into a small bakery, watching loaves slide from the oven, golden and warm. The baker wipes sweat from his brow. "We count time by smell," he says lightly, as if it's obvious. "When bread is ready, you smell it. No need for clocks." You chuckle quietly, imagining how absurd this seems today, yet it works perfectly in the rhythm of Athens. Each hour, each task has its place in the flow of light, labor, and human attention. Outside, a group of men debates philosophy as they eat figs and bread. Their conversation has no rush. It ebbs and flows, punctuated by gestures, laughter, and the passing of olives. Their words mark the day in the same way as the sun or the crowing of roosters, a natural clock embedded in society itself. Afternoon drifts slowly. You find yourself near a workshop where a sculptor chisels marble. His assistant measures the angles carefully, and both glance repeatedly at the shadow falling across the block. The artist nods. The light must be right. Shape appears only when time and sun agree. Historians still argue whether Greek sculptors really used the sun so deliberately, or if it is romanticized by later observers. You don't mind. Watching him work, you feel the slow cadence of hours as palpably as the swing of a pendulum, each cut and polish an echo of natural rhythm. Later, you sit in the shade of a tree, listening to the city breathe. Street noise fades into the gentle hum of conversation, footsteps, and the occasional clatter of pots. Somewhere, a child laughs, and the sound seems to mark an invisible hour, as accurate as any sundial. As evening approaches, merchants pack up, children return home, and the scent of evening fires drifts through the streets. You follow the fading light to a quiet courtyard where a woman is grinding grain. Her motions are slow and steady, the rhythm almost hypnotic. She pauses occasionally to glance at the shadows and nods, satisfied with the hour. You realize that the Greeks' daily life, for all its simplicity, is a masterclass in living in rhythm with the world. Time is neither enemy nor tyrant. It is companion, teacher, and framework. Each day has a natural beginning, middle, and end. Each task is embedded in the cycle of sun, work, and rest. As night falls, the city softens. Lamps are lit. The sound of conversation fades. You pause at the fountain, watching water ripple in the torchlight. Somewhere, a dog barks, a goat bleats, and the city exhales, ready to repeat the cycle tomorrow. You lean against the cool stone, breathing in the faint scent of olive oil and bread, and realize that the true lesson of Greek time is not in clocks or measurements, but in attentiveness, harmony, and presence. The rhythm of life itself becomes your clock. You close your eyes, letting the pulse of the city guide your breathing. Tomorrow, you think, the same pattern will return, and that is enough. The morning arrives slowly, stretching across the hills like a pale gold ribbon. You step out into the streets of a town that seems to breathe in time with the rhythms of ritual and reverence. Athens and its neighboring city-states are quiet now, but soon they will awaken to a day dedicated to the gods. For the Greeks, festivals are not mere entertainments, they are sacred markers of time, moments when the ordinary world pauses and the divine calendar takes over. You follow a narrow, cobbled street toward the temple, passing houses with whitewashed walls and small courtyards where women stir morning fires. The smell of roasting grain drifts along the path, mingling with the scent of olive oil and fresh herbs. Every step seems deliberate. Everyone knows that the day's hours are ruled by the god's presence, not by merchants or clocks. Ahead, the temple looms. Its columns gleam faintly in the rising sun, and the stone steps are already lined with worshippers. You feel the shift in energy, the kind that only comes when hundreds, sometimes thousands, of people synchronize their attention toward a single purpose. Time slows and stretches in these sacred hours. A priest emerges from the inner sanctuary, carrying a small bronze vessel of olive oil. He pours it carefully on the altar, chanting words you don't understand, but feel in your chest. Around him, the crowd responds with a soft murmur, a gentle hum of collective attention. The festival has begun. This is not just ceremony, it is time made visible. The rituals, prayers, and sacrifices mark hours and days, linking the present to the past and the promise of the future. The Athenians measure months by the sequence of these celebrations, the Panathenea, the Dionysia, Thesmophoria. Each festival signals a point in the year, a chapter in the rhythm of life. You watch as a group of women carry garlands, weaving through the crowd in careful steps. Their movements are deliberate, almost choreographed, synchronized with the rising sun. A young boy beside you whispers, "The priests say the gods notice the order. If we rush, they may frown." It feels odd to think the speed of your steps could displease a deity, but in this world, attention itself is a form of timekeeping. Ritual is as precise as any sundial. As the morning wears on, music begins to fill the temple courtyard. Flutes and drums, played by young acolytes, create a rhythm that carries through the columns. You notice how the sound guides the flow of the crowd, where to stand, when to kneel, when to offer prayers. In this, you see that festivals are both social and temporal anchors, teaching participants to live in sync with sacred time. A man near you explains quietly, "We don't just celebrate the gods, we measure the year by them. The month of Hecatombion begins with sacrifices to Zeus. The month of Metageitnion ends with the first harvest offering. It is how we remember that life is cyclical, not linear." You glance at the young boy again, who is carefully tracing circles in the dust with a stick. Perhaps he is counting the hours until the next chant, or simply marking the sequence of events in his own way. Either way, it is clear. Greek time is participatory. You do not merely watch, you become part of its unfolding. Midday arrives, and the sun is high. The scent of roasted meats and fresh bread drifts through the air. Women move quietly, carrying baskets of fruit and grain to the temple for offerings. Men attend to animals, preparing them for sacrifice. All of these activities follow the invisible schedule of the ritual, which is more important than any civic law or clock. You notice a subtle hierarchy in timing. The priests set the pace, but every participant has a role to play at a precise moment. A cow is led to the altar exactly as the sun reaches its apex. A hymn begins when the shadows stretch to a particular line on the steps. Even a simple torch lighting follows a sequence passed down for generations. Historians still argue whether the rituals always followed the exact same pattern or varied slightly depending on local customs. But watching it unfold, you understand. The human desire to mark time in connection with the divine is universal, even if the methods differ. By afternoon, the energy in the temple courtyard has shifted from solemnity to celebration. The initial offerings are complete. Musicians play more lively tunes, dancers twirl with wreaths on their heads, and children chase one another in the warm sunlight. These festivals, though sacred, are also celebrations of communal time, reminding participants that life is not only duty and devotion, but also joy and connection. You join the crowd in watching a theatrical performance tied to the festival. Masks gleam, feet drum, voices echo, and for a while, the boundaries between performer and observer blur. The stage, like the rituals, becomes a kind of temporal map, showing the past, guiding the present, and hinting at the cyclical future. A young girl whispers to her friend, "Do you think the gods notice our laughter?" The friend shrugs. "They notice everything, but maybe they like the fun too." The thought makes you smile. Perhaps this is one of the reasons Greeks tied so many festivals to seasons and agriculture, to remind themselves that time is not just measured in moments, but in participation and presence. Evening comes and the festival winds down. The priests extinguish lamps, the last offerings are burned, and the courtyard gradually empties. The city resumes its quieter rhythm, the pulse of ordinary life slowly taking back its place. You linger a moment, sensing the lingering energy of the sacred hours. You reflect on how time in the Greek world is layered. There is civic time, measured by officials and assemblies. There is agricultural time, measured by sun and soil. And there is sacred time, marked by festivals, prayers, and ritual. These layers overlap and intertwine, creating a complex, living calendar that governs human life as much as it is shaped by it. A final chorus of children sings a hymn to Demeter as the sun dips behind the hills. The notes are soft, imperfect, human, and perfect for marking the end of a day that has been measured not by minutes, but by reverence and communal rhythm. As night settles, torches flicker on the temple steps, shadows dancing across stone walls. Somewhere, an old man hums a tune that will be remembered tomorrow, repeated at another festival, next month, next season, next year. And you realize, in the Greek world, time is not only observed, it is celebrated. You walk home along narrow streets, the warm glow of lamps guiding you. The scent of roasting bread lingers. You feel the pulse of the city slowing, like a heartbeat settling into rest. And somewhere, just beyond hearing, the priest's words echo in your mind. Time is a gift to be marked with ritual, music, and care. By the time you close your eyes, the stars overhead are bright and steady, circling slowly in their eternal paths, keeping time for gods and mortals alike. And you, comfortably, are exactly in sync. Night falls, soft and quiet, stretching its dark cloak over the hills and rooftops. You step outside, letting the cool air wash over your shoulders, carrying with it the faint scent of olive groves and distant fires. Above, the stars begin to pierce the velvet sky, blinking awake one by one. The Greeks did not simply admire this canopy, they read it like a book, using constellations to mark the passing of months, the timing of festivals, and even the schedules of everyday life. You wander toward a small hill just outside the city, where a few students and their teacher have gathered. They have no telescopes, those belong to centuries yet unborn. But they have something just as powerful: sharp eyes, memory, and careful observation. The teacher gestures to the sky. "Look," he says, "Orion rises. Soon the rains will come. We will plant barley when the Pleiades disappear." You tilt your head, trying to spot the tiny cluster of stars. It seems faint, almost shy against the darkening heavens. And yet, to these observers, their movement is as precise as any clock. The rising, the setting, the shifting angles, they all measure the year more reliably than any sundial could. You imagine the astronomers of the time, standing on terraces or hilltops, clay tablets in hand, scratching notes, calculating angles. They divide the night sky into 28 or more divisions, corresponding loosely to lunar months. They notice the retrograde motions of planets, the regularity of eclipses, and the waxing and waning of the moon. Each movement becomes a tick of the cosmic clock, a rhythm that governs both sacred and mundane affairs. A young apprentice points upward. "The stars are God's fingerprints," he says softly. "They remind us that we are part of something bigger, that time is not only ours." You recall the farmer's son counting swallows, the baker measuring shadows, and the priests setting ceremonial hours. It's all connected. Human life synchronized with the sky, each layer of society attuned to celestial signals. Historians still argue whether the Greeks perceived these patterns as mathematical laws or divine guidance. But observing the sky, you understand why both interpretations feel right. Time is mathematical, yes, but it is also narrative, a story written in light, shadow, and movement. As the evening deepens, the teacher pulls out a small bronze gnomon, a simple vertical rod, and sets it in a flat stone. Its shadow stretches long and thin in the moonlight, then shrinks and lengthens as you watch. "Even this," he says, "can track hours, if you know how to read it. But it is only a tool, not the truth. The true clock is the sky itself." You touch the smooth bronze, imagining the countless hands that have held it before you. It strikes you as oddly comforting. Time, in this form, is both concrete and intangible, like water slipping through fingers, yet leaving ripples behind. Nearby, a girl traces the path of the moon with her finger, whispering its name. "Selene," she says. "She keeps watch while we sleep. And when she wanes, the month ends." It occurs to you that for the Greeks, astronomy and everyday life were inseparable. Farmers, priests, sailors, and merchants all read the sky to mark hours, predict weather, and plan events. One glance at Orion or the Pleiades could determine when to sow, when to harvest, and even when to hold weddings or sacrifices. You wander to the edge of a small dock overlooking the Aegean. A sailor points out Venus, low in the west. She tells us when to sail, he says. If we wait too long, the winds will shift. The water is calm, reflecting starlight like a black mirror scattered with diamonds. You dip a hand into the cool salt water, thinking how each ripple mirrors the larger motions above, the infinite turning of heavens mirrored in the finite turning of a boat. The sailor laughs softly. Historians still argue whether we tracked planets for profit or prophecy. I say it doesn't matter. The sea has its own clock, and the stars are its hands. You smile. In this world, precision and poetry exist side by side. The same night sky that guides a farmer or sailor also inspires philosophers and poets, each reading time through their own lens. A boy sits on a stone wall, quietly tracing the path of the moon through the constellations with a piece of charcoal on clay. He mutters to himself, "The first quarter rises, the full moon falls. If we plant now, the harvest will be plentiful." His tone is matter-of-fact, almost sleepy, yet the care in his observations feels sacred. You watch as he adjusts the shadow of a small sundial nearby, perfectly aware of the interaction between earth, sun, and stone. It is a quiet reminder that time in the Greek world is a living system, observed, calculated, and respected. It is not abstract. It is woven into daily tasks, rituals, festivals, and voyages. From sunrise to the first stars, every hour has meaning, every motion a lesson. Night grows cooler, the stars brighten. You lie back on the grass, letting the cosmic rhythm wash over you. Somewhere nearby, a flute plays a simple tune. The moon casts shadows that move imperceptibly, and you realize how patient time is. It moves with the same relentless grace for mortals and gods alike, indifferent to haste, worry, or desire. The teacher beside you gestures toward a constellation slowly climbing overhead. Each point of light, he says, is a guide. Some warn of storms, others mark festivals. Some measure hours. To live well, you learn to follow them. To ignore them is to be adrift. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the centuries of Greeks who have done the same. Farmers in the fields, sailors on the waves, philosophers in the groves, all reading the same sky, listening to the same rhythms. Time, you realize, is a shared experience, a network of natural, human, and divine markers binding generations together. Even in the quiet of night, there is life. An owl hoots. A stray dog rustles in the bushes. Somewhere, a girl's voice carries a whispered prayer to Selene. And above all, the stars continue their silent, precise dance, unchanging, eternal, yet intimately linked to every heartbeat below. For the Greeks, astronomy was not only science, but a spiritual compass, a clockwork of the cosmos that guided human life, anchored ritual, and synchronized society. You feel the truth in it, the gentle insistence that time is everywhere, in shadow, light, sound, and memory. As you rise and walk back toward the city, the air smells faintly of salt and thyme. The moon glimmers overhead. The world seems enormous, yet perfectly ordered. Each step you take is a rhythm in the ongoing pattern of Greek time, a single beat in an endless cosmic melody. Dawn arrives slowly, soft and golden, casting long shadows across the marble streets of Athens. You walk through the agora, which is beginning to stir with the hum of commerce. Merchants arrange their wares, olive oil, pottery, fish, and woven textiles on tables and mats. The air smells faintly of baked bread and sea salt, mixed with the tang of unwashed wool. You notice how carefully the city runs on schedules dictated by trade, a rhythm of exchange as old as the city itself. You pause at a stall where a man weighs silver coins in his hand. The scales tilt delicately, and he nods to the buyer, who counts carefully in return. "We must be precise," he says. "A drachma too few, and the contract is void." You realize that contracts in ancient Greece are not merely legal documents, they are temporal commitments, promises bound to moments, days, and seasons. The concept of time here is practical. A merchant might agree to deliver wine at the new moon, or settle debts by the next festival. Some contracts even specify the hour, a payment to be made before the fifth cock's crow, or a delivery to arrive by midday. These agreements are woven into everyday rhythms, reflecting the Greeks' awareness that time is both shared and enforceable. A scribe sits nearby, copying out agreements onto wax tablets. His stylus scratches across the surface in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You notice the care with which he works. "A mistake," he mutters, "can ruin both time and trust." The Greeks understood that time spent writing, counting, and measuring is as sacred as time spent in ritual or harvest. A young apprentice approaches you, holding a small clay tablet. He explains that certain contracts were tied to specific seasons or astronomical events. If a shipment of grain does not arrive before the rising of the Pleiades, the buyer may refuse it, he says, tapping the tablet. It is all written down, so everyone knows the proper sequence of events. You watch a shipment of amphorae being loaded onto a cart. The laborers follow precise timing. Some work when the sun is high, others when shadows lengthen, ensuring the jars don't crack in the heat. The city is a clockwork of human and natural rhythms, each movement synchronized to light, heat, and need. Historians still argue whether trade in the Greek world relied more on social trust or rigid timing, but observing the agora, you see it as both. Contracts, ceremonies, and shared expectations create a temporal web that keeps society functioning smoothly. By midday, the sun is strong. Merchants pause to drink water or eat olives. Shoppers haggle lazily, their voices rising and falling like a gentle tide. You notice that even the simplest transactions respect natural markers of time. Bread is bought when it is fresh, fish is delivered before it spoils, and debts are settled promptly so the rhythm of commerce remains intact. A merchant waves at a young woman carrying a basket of figs. "The market closes with the first shadow on the northern colonnade," he says. She nods and quickens her pace. The schedule is embedded in landmarks, sunlight, and human attention, not clocks or watches. Contracts extend beyond trade. You observe a small group of farmers discussing a lease for olive groves. They agree on dates and terms by referencing festivals, solstices, and the movements of the moon. One says, "The lease lasts until the next hecatombaia, when the harvest is offered to Athena." They laugh softly, aware that time is both practical and sacred. Nearby, a potter notes orders for vases. He reminds his apprentice, "We must finish these by the month's end, before the festival of Dionysus." Each task follows a rhythm dictated by cultural, religious, and economic cycles. Time is a guide and a constraint, respected by all who participate in city life. You walk to the edge of the harbor, where traders from other cities unload amphorae of wine and oil. Sailors shout across the quay, negotiating space and timing for unloading. A merchant points to the rising sun. By the hour of the second crowing, the cargo must be secured. You watch as men work in measured steps, aware that timing affects not only efficiency, but profit, safety, and trust. A child playing nearby kicks a stray amphora gently. "Time will tell if it breaks," he murmurs, almost as if acknowledging the inevitability of the moment. You chuckle quietly, realizing that even play reflects an intuitive understanding of cause and effect, sequence and consequence, all elements of time. As afternoon stretches on, contracts are finalized, payments made, and goods exchanged. The agora's energy shifts from bustling chaos to a quieter rhythm. Merchants count coins, note deliveries, and discuss upcoming festivals and shipments. The city's heartbeat slows, but the rhythm of time continues, imperceptible yet constant, guiding all actions. You remember the farmer in the countryside and the baker in the city. Across professions and social layers, everyone participates in this shared temporal dance. Time is simultaneously abstract and practical, divine and human, observed in stars, shadows, or signatures. As evening approaches, the market winds down. Merchants pack away wares, apprentices sweep dust from stone steps, and travelers prepare for night journeys. You notice that the final transactions are often guided by subtle markers: the first cockcrow of a returning day, the lowering sun, or the shadow stretching across a column. Even in commerce, the Greeks follow nature's cues, not artificial measures. You pause to watch a scribe close his tablet case and step into the fading light. The ink has dried, the deals are recorded, and society's pulse continues in quiet order. You sense that contracts and commerce are not just about goods or money. They are about honoring time itself, respecting its flow, and participating in the continuity of life. Night descends, bringing calm to the city. Lamps flicker along the marble streets, and you hear the distant hum of conversation from taverns and homes. The agora lies still, a silent testament to a day well measured, a rhythm maintained, and a society bound together by the interwoven strands of human action and temporal awareness. As you walk toward your resting place, the stars above reflect on the polished amphorae of the harbor, echoing the cosmic and human clocks that define life in ancient Greece. Each step, each heartbeat, each breath is part of the ongoing sequence, a gentle reminder that time is everywhere, quietly guiding, teaching, and sustaining. Morning light spills over the Acropolis, soft and hazy, brushing the white marble with a gentle glow. You wander down a quiet street, drawn by the faint notes of a lyre drifting through an open window. Music, you quickly realize, is not merely entertainment for the Greeks. It is a subtle measure of time, guiding the flow of daily life and reflecting the rhythm of the cosmos itself. You step closer, pausing to listen. Inside, a musician plucks the strings of a small wooden lyre. The notes rise and fall with deliberate care, like a conversation between heaven and earth. Each melody has its place in the day: morning tunes that awaken the senses, afternoon rhythms that soothe laborers, evening chants that ease the mind toward rest. Music, in this sense, is an auditory clock, a gentle companion that marks the passing hours. You follow the sound to a small courtyard where several musicians are gathered. One plays the alos, a reed instrument with a sharp, penetrating tone. Another taps a drum, steady and deliberate, while a third hums a soft tune. The combination is hypnotic, a layered rhythm that seems to synchronize human activity with natural cycles. A young apprentice notices your interest and explains. We play certain melodies when the sun reaches its apex, others when shadows stretch long. Music organizes the day as much as the sun or the moon does. You nod, fascinated. Here, time is felt as much as it is seen or counted, a movement sensed through ear and body rather than eyes or instruments. Historians still argue whether these musical rhythms were codified or improvised, but watching them, you sense a natural order, a shared understanding passed down through generations, guiding everything from labor to worship to play. Music, like sunlight on the stones, keeps time without words. A group of children gathers nearby, clapping and stomping to the beat of a playful tune. Their laughter blends with the music, creating a living rhythm that fills the courtyard. You realize that time, for the Greeks, was participatory. Everyone, musician, listener, child, laborer, contributes to the ongoing flow, marking hours not with dials, but with action and attention. The lyre player changes the tempo, slowing it slightly as the sun tilts toward the west. A hush falls over the courtyard. People pause, adjusting their tasks, glancing at shadows, and taking in the subtle shift. Even small changes in rhythm carry meaning, signaling transitions. The end of labor, the approach of meal, the closing of the day. You wander toward the agora, where street musicians perform for passing shoppers and traders. A flutist plays a gentle tune while coins clink in a basket. The melody adapts to the pace of the crowd, faster for bustling traffic, slower when movement slows. Music here is both practical and poetic, helping humans measure and experience time in a shared social context. Nearby, a sculptor taps the base of a marble column, counting his strokes to the rhythm of a lute. Each chisel strike is deliberate, almost dance-like, blending sound and labor into a single temporal practice. You note the parallels with the water clocks and sundials you have seen. All are tools to mark intervals, all integrate human perception and activity, and all are bound to the flow of natural cycles. As midday passes, the music shifts to more reflective melodies. The alos plays long, mournful notes, the lyre a soft, continuous hum. People stop, even for a moment, allowing themselves to feel the passage of hours in their bodies and minds. A woman pauses from her shopping, closing her eyes to listen. "This is how I know it is time to rest," she whispers. You realize she doesn't need a sundial. The music itself is her clock. Historians still argue about how standardized these musical systems were, whether there were strict modes tied to hours or simply customary practices. You sense both are true. Music was flexible, adapted to context, yet its effect on human perception of time was universal. By late afternoon, the courtyard fills with layered sounds. A drum tapping a slow pulse, a lyre weaving high notes, voices joining in chorus. You watch as people move in sync with the rhythms, completing errands, preparing meals, and arranging objects. Even conversation is affected. Phrases rise and fall, echoing the cadence of instruments. Here, music structures life as much as sunlight or ritual. A young boy steps forward to learn the lyre. His teacher guides his fingers carefully, noting that the proper timing of notes is essential, not for performance alone, but for aligning with the day. If you play too fast, he says, you disrupt the rhythm of hours. Too slow, and the day lingers unnaturally. You find this oddly comforting. Even art must respect the flow of time. As evening approaches, the music softens. Drums fade, flutes become whispers, and the lyre strings hum lightly. The sun leans low in the sky, painting golden streaks across stone and tile. People pause in doorways, listening to the final notes, allowing themselves to transition from labor to rest. Even the simplest melody signals the approach of night, reminding everyone that time moves onward, whether noticed or not. You wander into a quiet street, where a lone musician continues a soft tune. The melody seems to stretch seconds into minutes, moments into something more lasting. It strikes you that music, in its most essential form, is a meditation on temporality, a way for humans to inhabit, measure, and feel time deeply. Nearby, a dog yawns, a child hums a faint imitation, and the smell of cooking bread drifts through the warm evening air. You pause to watch shadows stretch and fold across walls, noting how subtly music has accompanied every stage of the day. As night deepens, the city quiets. Music now flows mostly in private homes or small taverns. The evening is gentle, measured in whispers, sighs, and fading notes. You recall the sunrise and the morning lyre, the children clapping in the courtyard, and the flutists in the agora. All these moments form a continuous cycle, where sound tracks the passage of hours as reliably as any instrument or shadow. You close your eyes briefly, letting the soft hum of music, the faint chatter, and the distant lapping of water combine into a sense of flowing time. It is invisible yet tangible, universal yet intimate. You realize that for the Greeks, music was the heartbeat of the day, a subtle, human, and artistic way of joining with the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. Night settles fully. The stars shine bright overhead. The streets are still, yet you can almost hear the echoes of the day's music lingering in the stones, waiting for the next sunrise. And as you take a final deep breath, you understand that to live fully in Greek time is to hear, feel, and move with its music, to become part of a rhythm far larger than any single life, yet intimately bound to it. Dawn breaks slowly, soft and pale, spilling gentle light over the rolling hills surrounding Athens. You rise with the rhythm of the day, yet your mind drifts upward, toward the cycles that govern the year, the seasons that shape the city, and the natural rhythms the Greeks have long observed. Beyond hours and minutes, beyond rituals, music, or contracts, there is a broader cadence, the annual passage of time, marked by sun, moon, and the pulse of nature itself. You wander through olive groves, their silvery leaves catching the early light, imagining the farmers of centuries past. Each year, they follow patterns not written on tablets, but carved into experience. The month of Hecatombion signals sowing, Metagatnion heralds the first olive harvest, Boedromion aligns with the first rains. These cycles are both practical and symbolic, guiding labor while embedding meaning into the flow of life. You probably won't survive this many details without nodding off, but it is worth it. The Greeks believed that attention to such patterns ensures harmony with the natural and divine order. In the cities, festivals punctuate the year like carefully placed notes in a long composition. The Panathenea honors Athena, the Dionysia celebrates theater and wine, and the Thesmophoria honors Demeter and fertility. Each event ties human activity to natural cycles, reminding citizens that life is intertwined with cosmic rhythm. Even the civic calendar, imperfect as it was, respects the moon and sun, blending observation with tradition. You stroll into the agora, which is quieter than usual, the midday sun casting long, cool shadows across the marble. Merchants adjust inventories in preparation for upcoming festivals. Contracts are written with due dates keyed to seasonal markers. Bakers anticipate feasts and offerings. Every action is embedded in the year's flow, a subtle choreography where human schedules mirror celestial rhythms. Historians still argue whether festivals were more for religious devotion or civic cohesion. Perhaps it does not matter. They served both, aligning community and cosmos, human and divine, social obligation and personal reflection. The seasons themselves carry lessons. Winter is for rest and planning, spring for planting and anticipation, summer for labor and harvest, autumn for celebration and reflection. You watch children gathering figs and olives, their laughter echoing in courtyards, while adults check the progress of crops and store surplus for months ahead. Even play, you realize, follows seasonal rhythms, marking the year's passage through joyful repetition. You pause at a small temple, where offerings are left for the gods. A priest measures the light of the rising sun across the altar, noting that it falls differently as the year turns. His hands move slowly, deliberately, as if touching time itself. You see that Greek awareness of time was both practical and contemplative, grounded in observation, yet always hinting at the eternal. By afternoon, the sun leans westward. Farmers and artisans alike follow long-practiced routines keyed to the sun's path, adjusting work as needed. Music drifts from open windows, lyres, alloy, and gentle songs marking the transition from labor to rest. Even in sound, time becomes tangible, a way to inhabit hours as they unfold, integrating daily rhythm with annual cycles. You watch a potter shaping clay, his hands guided not only by skill, but by awareness of sunlight and shadow. He stops occasionally, glancing at the sky to ensure the angle of light will enhance the vase's shape. In this, you recognize a theme repeated throughout the Greek world: observation, patience, and alignment with nature define the experience of time. Evening approaches, softening light across rooftops and hills. The city quiets gradually, steps slowing, voices lowering, lamps flickering to life. You feel the same rhythm echo in yourself, your heartbeat syncing with the long arc of the day. Somewhere, distant music hums, a chorus of voices joining the wind, reminding you that time is not only counted, but felt, shared, and participated in. A gentle breeze carries the scent of olive oil, bread, and late blooms. You imagine the months turning slowly, like pages in a vast book, each season a chapter, each festival a paragraph, each hour a line of poetry. The Greeks understood that time's meaning grows with attention, that living in harmony with natural cycles ensures not just survival, but a sense of continuity and calm. You find a quiet courtyard, settling on cool marble steps. Somewhere nearby, a child counts knuckle bones, a baker polishes bowls, and a poet murmurs verses to the stars. Shadows lengthen across the city, folding streets and rooftops into soft patterns. You notice how everything, the cycles of the day, the rituals of the year, the slow passage of seasons, interweaves into a gentle, sustaining rhythm. Even the smallest actions are temporal markers: the lowering of a torch, the stretch of a shadow, the hush as a lyre's final note fades. Time, in its broadest sense, is everywhere: in nature, in human activity, in music, in ritual, and in the quiet reflection that follows each passing season. As night deepens, stars shimmer overhead, spinning slowly, eternal and constant. You think of the Greeks observing the same sky, linking constellations with festivals, harvests, and personal lives. Every generation participates in this ongoing cycle, measuring existence not only by hours and days, but by months, seasons, and celestial events. You lean back, breathing slowly, letting the city, the groves, and the stars wash over you. The rhythm of the year unfolds naturally. The cycles of planting and harvest, festivals and rest, labor and music, waking and sleeping. You realize that in this world, time is both structured and fluid, observed carefully, yet experienced gently. The night air cools, torches flicker. Somewhere, laughter echoes from a courtyard, distant music drifts along rooftops, and the city exhales. You close your eyes, letting the cycles of Greek time lull you into stillness, the eternal rhythm of days, seasons, and stars carrying you toward rest. The city quiets completely now, the streets empty, and the torch's warm glow softens to shadows. You lie back beneath the olive trees, letting the night air brush gently over your skin. Your thoughts drift slowly through the days, the festivals, the markets, and the rhythms of labor you have witnessed. Each moment folds into the next, like soft waves lapping the shore, and you feel a gentle sense of completion. Breathe in. Let the warmth of the sun from earlier, the cool of the marble steps, the faint scent of bread and olive oil, and the subtle hum of music dissolve into calm. Time, once measured in drips, shadows, or plucked strings, now feels boundless yet comforting, stretching outward in quiet order. You realize that Greek time is not a task to be completed, but a companion, a gentle guide through moments both small and large. The stars above shine steadily, a reminder that cycles endure beyond human worry. Seasons will turn, festivals will return, and life will continue in rhythmic repetition. And in this, you find a soft reassurance. No rush, no pressure, only the flow of hours, days, and years, carrying you gently through existence. Listen to the wind rustling leaves, the distant night sounds, and the faint echo of laughter or song from earlier. Let yourself merge with the rhythm of the world, your mind slowing, your heartbeat aligning with the gentle cadence of life. Now, dimly aware of the city, the groves, and the eternal sky, let your eyes close. Drift through these cycles as softly as you drift through sleep, feeling time not as a burden, but as a soothing, endless companion. End of script. Sweet dreams.